The disease of the heart that we're going to mention in this video has been described by the scholars as the root cause of all diseases of the heart. And if this disease is left untreated, then from it sprouts every other disease that you can think of, which is why it is so incredibly destructive. And I advise you sincerely to stay until the very end, because you could very well have this disease because of how silent and deadly it is. It is that silent and deadly that the Prophet ﷺ, he likened it to be more hidden than the crawling of an ant. If you look into the distance and you see an ant walking across the wall, you can barely detect it, you can barely see it, and you can definitely not hear it. If it walks across the wall, 9 times out of 10, you are not going to notice it. And this is the state of the disease that we're talking about. This disease is known as Riya, which is commonly known to be minor shirk. It's that bad. Now, what is Riya? Riya, to give you the most basic definition so that you know exactly what it is and whether or not you have it, is where you take any act of worship that is meant for Allah and you do it for the people instead. Why would you do that? To gain benefit from the people, to gain praise from the people, or because you're scared from the people because of a matter that is about to happen. And we're going to give examples for all of these, inshallah ta'ala. But first, how do we define an act of worship? Because we said that Riya is taking an act of worship that is meant for Allah and doing it for the people instead. So it's very important to define all the terms here so that we're all on the same page and we know exactly what it is. An act of worship is any speech or action, internal or external, that Allah Himself loves and is pleasing to Him. This is what an act of worship is. And if you do that for the people instead of Allah, this is what Riya is. So for example, you might be in the masjid and you're praying your salah and you notice people come into the masjid. It was once empty, and whilst you're praying, people started coming in. You're engaged in an act of worship. This is an act that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves. But once the people walk into the masjid and you hear their footsteps, suddenly you become more upright and you lengthen your prayers and you carry yourself with dignity and humility so that the people look at you and they say, wow, subhanallah, they praise you. Wow, this guy's so pious. You see what I mean? This is an example, a very common example of Riya. Now, there are 3 levels of severity to Riya. The first one being the most severe and the last one being the least severe, but nevertheless, all of them are classed as Riya. The very first level, which is the most severe, is the Riya that leads you to committing sins. Let me give you an example, and this is a vile level to be on. An example could be that you know someone who is into business and they're a very successful business person and they're out there looking for a business partner. And so when you're around this person, you start acting pious in front of them. You start doing acts of worship that Allah loves in front of them, just so that they trust you enough to take you on board and to make you their business partner. And so when you do that over and over again and their heart warms to you, they actually make you their business partner. But then when you become their business partner, you cheat them and you steal from their business only for you to become rich. This is the most severe, most disgusting type of Riya. The second level is where you have Riya to gain benefit in the dunya. So you're not committing sins, but you're actually just doing it to gain some sort of benefit. So for example, many people now, we live in the age of social media, they get social media only to increase their following, only to go viral on certain videos, only to post so that they have that gratification of people commenting and people giving them attention. And so if you guys open a social media account, and this is sadly the case for many people, and you start posting Islamic reminders and you post Quran recitations and you edit videos in a specific way for the sole purpose of getting attention from people, then you have committed an act of Riya. Now, of course, it goes without saying that if you're doing it to get attention so that you spread Allah's word, this is perfectly fine. But if you do it solely just to go viral, solely just so you can get attention from people, this is when it becomes Riya, and this is level 2. The third level, which is the least severe but it is still classed as Riya, is where you commit Riya out of fear of upsetting the people. This is also very, very common. So for example, let's say you're in the mosque and the adhan is finished and everyone stands up to pray 2 units of prayer. You wouldn't have prayed 2 units of prayer unless you saw everyone stand up and you felt like you're going to be judged, and so you stand up too and then you join in and you pray 2 units of prayer as well. You see? Now, if this acts as an encouragement. If people standing up makes you encouraged to pray 2 units of prayer, this is perfectly fine. But if you feel like that you're going to be judged and you fear that people are going to say so-and-so didn't stand up for prayer in Sunnah, etc., and you stand up for that reason, then this is also an act of Riya. So, alhamdulillah, you should have a very strong idea as to what makes Riya, and we're ready to move on to the exceptions of Riya. What are the exceptions when it comes to Riya? There are 2 exceptions. The first one is when you show the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on yourself to the people. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, وَأَمَّا بِنِعْمَةِ رَبِّكَ فَحَدِّثْ. Proclaim the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Proclaim the blessings of your Lord. The Prophet ﷺ, he also said, إِنَّ اللَّهَ عَزَّ وَجَلْ يُحِبُّ أَنْ يَرَى أَثَرَهُ عَلَى عَبْدِهِ حَسَنًا. That verily Allah loves to see the traces of blessings on His servant. Meaning, if Allah has given you wealth, if He has given you the means, then show that means on you. And if you indeed do that and you buy good clothes, you buy nice cars, you buy good things, only to show the blessings of Allah that He's given you because He's commanded you to do so, then this form of Riya, if you like, is rewardable. The Muslim was never asked to wear ripped up clothes and to live this minimal life. Never was the Muslim asked to do that. Rather, the Muslim is asked to gather the dunya, but make sure it is in the hands and not in the heart. You see the difference? And so this is one of the exceptions of Riya. The second exception is if you've committed a sin, then it is an obligation for you to hide your sin to the best of your ability. Why? Out of fear of the people seeing it, to protect your honor and your dignity. Sin is a source of humiliation, not just for you, but what you represent as well. You are a Muslim carrying the banner of Islam. You are a Muslim who carries dignity and honor. If you sin and people do not know of your sin, it is an obligation for you to hide that sin out of fear that people find out without a shadow of a doubt. You need to preserve your image. You need to preserve your reputation as much as possible, because if not, your image and your reputation can be damaged, which could also damage the image and reputation of Islam, especially with most of you guys living in the West. Tayyib. What are some frequently asked questions with regards to Riyad? There's many questions that people ask again and again, and it confuses them. So I'm going to mention 2, which I think should cover it all. And bi'idhnillah ta'ala, you'll have a very firm understanding. The first frequently asked question is, what if I have a mix of sincerity with Riya in my actions? So let's say I'm doing an act of worship. What if I'm doing it for Allah, but part of me knows that I'm also doing it for other people as well at the same time? There's a mixture of sincerity and then doing it for the people. What does that mean? Does that affect my reward? Is this even Riya? The scholars, they've differed. Some scholars, they say that an action is completely rejected if you have a mixture of sincerity with Riya. But some scholars, they say that you do get rewards, but it reduces the ajr, the reward, and the blessings you have in the act of worship. Meaning, the purer your intention behind doing an act of worship, whether it's posting on social media for the sake of Allah, making dawah videos, or going out of your way volunteering for charitable organizations or anything like that, the purer your sincerity, the greater the reward and the greater the blessings of your actions. But if there's anything or any aspect of it that seeps in for the people, then it reduces the blessings and it reduces the rewards. So that's the first frequently asked question. The second frequently asked question is if you identify that you have Riya in your actions. Let's say, for example, you're praying in the mosque and someone walks in, and then suddenly you start straightening up and praying a longer prayer because someone is inside, and then you identify you have this Riya that's seeped in. Should you stop doing that action? Absolutely not. Scholars have said that it's better for you to do an action with Riya and work on your heart and your intention than leaving that action altogether. In fact, leaving that action is a form of Riya itself, because think about it. Let's say you're in sujood and you start prolonging your sujood and you recognize that you're doing it because there's other people there. If you get up from sujood, then you have left your sujood for the people as well. Rather, what you should do is you should stay in sujood and you prolong your sujood and you fix your intention so that you're doing it for Allah once again. And this concept is found in the Quran, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ زَكَّاهَا. Successful is the one who is constantly purifying their hearts. constantly purifying. It's an ongoing process. You can never achieve a clean heart and that's it, done. You're always going to be scrubbing at your heart because it gets dirty and dirty as time progresses. You see? And so if Riya seeps in, just clean it away, continue doing the act, and all is good. At this point, you guys should know exactly what Riya is. And now we're ready to go into what the cures of Riya is, so that if you identify you do have Riya, you will know exactly how to cure them bi'idhnillah ta'ala. The cures can be split into two sections. The first one is the theoretical cures of Riya, and the second one is the practical cures of Riya. Let's start with the theoretical cure. Realize that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that has ultimate power and control over everything. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he said, وَاعْلَمْ أَنَّ الْأُمَّةَ لَوْ اجْتَمَعَتْ عَلَىٰ أَنْ يَنْفَعُوكَ بِشَيْءٍ لَمْ يَنْفَعُوكَ إِلَّا بِشَيْءٍ قَدْ كَتَبَهُ اللَّهُ لَكَ. Know that if all the nations gather together to benefit you, they can never benefit you unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed that you get benefit. And if all the nations gather to harm you in any way, they cannot harm you unless Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed it for you. So if Allah has ultimate authority in this universe, why are you turning away from Allah to the people? That job that you want, or that money that you desire, or that status that you're yearning for, it all comes from Allah in the first place. So why are you tweaking your actions, doing it for the people, when Allah is the one that gives you these things in the first place? You're turning away from the one that can give you these things to someone who has no control over anything. When you reason like that, you realize that there is really something that you should take under control without a shadow of a doubt. Now for the practical cures, and we're going to mention 3 inshallah ta'ala. The first one that you can do to get rid of Riya and to melt it away from your heart is to strive to hide your good deeds the way that you strive to hide your bad deeds. Allahu Akbar. Subhanallah. What a powerful cure. If you commit a sin in the comfort of your own home, you would hate for people to find out about that sin. You would be so embarrassed. You would do anything to hide your bad deeds. And so the same way you would do that, strive to do that with your good deeds. Now it has to be mentioned that showing good deeds is not necessarily a bad thing. And in fact, it can be a good thing if you're encouraging other people to do the same thing. But try to keep that to a minimum and increase the amount of good deeds that you do in private to balance everything out. Do you understand? So that's the first practical cure of Riya. The second one is to increase in reading Surah Al-Ikhlas. Subhanallah. Surah Al-Ikhlas, which we all know and we've all memorized, is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, قُلْ هُوَ اللَّهُ أَحَدٌ. Say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. Allahu Samad. Allah is the one who is in total control. All hearts depend on Him and He depends on none. Emphasizing this aspect of authority, emphasizing that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is in control. So why do things for other than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? You see? لَمْ يَلِدْ وَلَمْ يُولَدْ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. He does not beget, nor is He begotten. Again, emphasizing His independence. وَلَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ كُفُوًا أَحَدٌ. And there's absolutely no one on the face of the planet or in creation that has any similarity to Him whatsoever. Meaning He's the only one that can provide, and everyone else is in need for His provision. And so this is something that will melt Riya out of your heart. Finally, the third cure is to increase in reciting Sayyidul Istighfar, which is part of our morning and evening adhkar. And this is where we say every single morning and evening, اللهم أنت ربي لا إله إلا أنت خلقتني وأنا عبدك وأنا على عهدك ووعدك ما استطعت أعوذ بك من شر ما صنعت أبوء لك بنعمتك علي وأبوء لك بذنبي فاغفر لي فإنه لا يغفر الذنوب إلا أنت. O Allah, you are my Lord. There is no God but you. You created me and I am your servant. I'm committed to you and your promise as much as I can. I seek refuge in you, O Allah, from all the evil that I've done. I acknowledge your favors and I acknowledge my sins, so forgive me. Verily, no one forgives sins but you. Essentially, this dua, guys, is where you are affirming and you're reinforcing that Allah is above us and we are below Him, and it is Him whose hearts turn to and not to other people, inshallah. If you can act upon this video and memorize it and spread it around, I'm sure the ummah collectively will become a better place when the Riya melts away from our hearts, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.